Welcome into a live Inside Carolina podcast. It is the annual prediction show. Tommy Ashley, Greg Barnes, Buck Sanders, producer John Bauman, Jason Staples in a mind of his own. No Taylor Vippolis tonight, couldn't join us. Johnny T-shirt's definitely a thing, and certainly On 3 is a thing. If you are not a member of the new Inside Carolina message board community at On 3, sign up at the new On 3 website, get your username, get everything you need, sign up for $1. Join us. It is the same band of brothers. John Bauman, you're going to start the show off. You got it. We got to go back before we can go forward. Buck, while John's talking, get your hourglass. We're going to predict this season, and we're going to do with the motto of Buck's words last year. We don't know squat, but we're still going to try. We're still going to predict them. I would wager we're more accurate not knowing squat than we have known squat. But, John, what did it look like last year and beyond?
Yeah, let's take a look at last year's board. It was not a great year for any of us. It was not a great year for the Inside Carolina community either. There were a lot of 9-3s and a lot of 8-4s on the board. The Inside Carolina community, you, the chat, picked 10-2. And as we know, UNC ended up going 6-7. Not our best year in terms of picking wins and losses either. Let's take a look at over the course of all the years that we've done this. So pulling up the historical picks here. So you can see these rows. This is each season, 2021, 2022, 23, 24. To orient ourselves here, here's the famous 12-0 prediction by Tommy. We should give Tommy some more credit, though. He was pressured by the chat to select 12-0. And also, in fairness, he did pick UNC to lose in the ACC championship.
John, we don't give in to peer pressure. One of our jobs is to stand tall and to stand on our own beliefs and not to cave. So, no, I don't think we have to give him any additional credit there.
Wait, look, that is the immaculate prediction show that will live in not infamy, but it famously will. More people have said 12-0 Tommy than have said my last name over the last 5 years. So at least it's come out good. And, you know, I'm not the only one that had high expectations that year. Look at those years.
That's right.
Look at that. And Carolina went 6-6. That should tell you how the last 5 years have been.
Taylor with the 11-1 prediction has skated a lot of criticism thanks to you, Tommy. So we're also going to shout out Greg as well here using kind of the golf scoring. Greg was 3 over, too high in 2021, but net over the 4 years we've done this, Greg has been the closest in terms of the predictions. So we'll see what it looks like this year. Fresh start, clean board for everyone here in 2025.
So before we get started, does anybody want to say anything? Anybody want to make any excuses or anything?
I want to say something.
Floor is yours.
John just set me up. No, I think if you look at those records that we've predicted, and even what the fan base has predicted over the last 4 years, I guess it would be easy to call us homers. I think if you've listened to us, you know that's not the case, although the 12-0 Tommy doesn't help in that regard. But we really come at these from a rational perspective. And I think what that shows over the last 4 years is the average consensus is that Carolina should have been better than what it was. And I don't know that there's anybody watching this who disagrees with that. And that's one of the things I think a lot of us are excited about with Bill Belichick coming in is that, all right, they may not have the talent, but they're not going to be outcoached like they have been in recent years. Therefore, Carolina should play at least equal to their talent level, if not better.
That's why they have a different coach here, right?
Yeah.
Put Slagle's comment back up there. Carolina has largely underperformed. I would say, have they? I've said how many years, Greg and Buck, have I said this is an 8-4 program until proven otherwise? And to be honest, they haven't been that. They've been probably
8 wins is pretty good around here, guys.
It was pretty good around here, and it was acceptable around here. I don't think that lives that way. To Greg's point about the coaching and all, but look, we haven't seen the live game yet, so we don't know for sure, do we?
We have it, and I don't disagree with your 8-4 program talk, Tommy. But I do think under Mac Brown 2.0, we've talked about this a lot, but let's bring it up one last time. Carolina was 0-8 against teams ranked in the top 20 of F+, which is the combination of FEI and SP+. 0-8 against top 20 teams, and they were 8-14 against top 40 teams. So they weren't even close to 500 against top 40 teams.
One other thought I'd throw in there is that I thought that the way that Mac Brown started out recruiting, that North Carolina would be far better than the record that he put up. I mean, the level of recruit he was bringing in, unless every recruiting expert in the world had lost their minds, that level of recruiting class should have performed better early in his tenure, and he probably would have kept the recruiting momentum going had that happened. So some very famous busts there, particularly on the defensive line, and other places as well. But I think that's the thing that indicts the Mac Brown era more than anything, is that relative to the talent that he was recruiting, North Carolina should have had better win-loss record. That's my opinion.
I've been considered the positivity guy of, Buck, in case you didn't know, some people say I'm positively the positive person. Let me ask you a question, though, Greg. How many times has Carolina beaten a team they weren't supposed to beat in the last 5 years? Can we remember one? Maybe the Miami games?
Yeah, Miami was probably it in 2020, right?
That's it. In the last 5 years. And that is where I think this could change things for North Carolina, this new quote-unquote era of this. And, we can talk about recruiting, we can talk about all that, but I think just playing solid football, and Jason and I have talked about this before on some of the shows we've done, just playing solid fundamental football wins you more games than not. Because what do they always say? More games are lost than they're actually won. What you want, Jason? Get in here, Jason. He's out. Let's get it rolling. We got 300 people in there. They didn't come to hear us talk about all the past stuff.
I'm just going to say, Tommy, if I start on this subject right now, I'm going to lose my egg timer privileges for later in the show. So I yield the balance of my present time.
What egg timer privileges?
Buck has got we all need a golden hourglass around here. But let's get rolling. So the order is, everybody can see on the screen if you're in here, and shout out to 307. If you're not subscribed to Inside Carolina's YouTube channel, do it now so you can comment in the chat. If you're not subscribed to Inside Carolina, get on 3 and subscribe to Inside Carolina. And let's get rolling. Buck, Jason, Greg, me, John, IC community is the order we'll go in. We may do a snake draft. Jason, I'm going to boost your audio a little bit as you're a little bit low, and I can handle that, so don't do anything on your end. But, Buck, you're up. TCU. On to TCU. It's almost a week away. What you got?
I've got us down for an L there. I won't get into all the reasons why, but I think they bring back a solid team. They know more about their team than we know about ours. So I'm going with TCU to start. Hate it, but that's how I see it.
Jason Staples and then Greg Barnes.
So I'm going to go with a loss as well to TCU. I've been on the fence about this. This is a 0.51 for me. As you'll remember, I do the decimals system here. This is a 0.51, or 0.49 since I've got it as a loss. This is a 0.49. I think this is very much a coin flip game. And in all honesty, if Austin Blaske had not gotten hurt in camp and I felt a little bit better about the center position with Blasky and potentially Kelly, and Kelly certainly not being full strength if he is playing in this game. If I felt better about the interior of the offensive line because of one of those injuries not having happened, but particularly the Blasky injury, that probably flips my pick here. But just out of the interest of safety on this, I would rather slow play this team than overestimate them. So I'm going to go with the loss here. But I think this is going to be a very, very interesting and a game that we're going to learn a whole lot about this team on. And they could lose this game and still go on to have a very successful season.
There you go, Greg Barnes.
Yeah, I think Buck and Jason are right on. We just don't know anything about this team really, and we're going to have to see how that plays out. It would be nice for North Carolina to be able to play Charlotte or Richmond in the season opener. Now you wouldn't have quite the fanfare, although you would still have significant for Belichick. But TCU's a good team. They were sneaky good last year. They started slow. And after that bad year in 2023, everybody kind of forgot about them. They finished 9-4. They were top 25 in SP plus. Josh Hoover's back. He had a really good year last year at quarterback. They have really good depth on defense. They did lose some key players, but have a lot of guys who played a lot of snaps. And so I think that's going to be a solid team for Sonny Dykes in year number 4. I agree that this game doesn't really tell us too much in terms of win or loss about how good this team can be. I do think that if this game was probably later in the year, I'd be more comfortable picking North Carolina. But I'm always the guy that I've got to see it first. We just have not seen anything. So I have TCU winning this one.
Yeah, I have to disappoint some of my fans. Without the Blasky injury, and especially without the Christo Kelly injury, I'm going to have to pick it as a loss. TCU simply, a couple of reasons. One, as Greg said, they were good last year. They've got some guys returning. They've got a good quarterback. I'm just not convinced Carolina's interior line is going to be able to hold up against TCU in the first game. So I'm going to go with a loss and get the first one out of the way. And it feels like kind of like South Carolina, I believe, in 15. Greg, is that when we were down there covering that game when they lost the first game of the year?
It was 14, I think, right?
I can't remember. It's whenever Elijah Hood didn't touch the ball inside the 5-yard line. I want to say that was 15, but at any rate.
That was 15. 13 was the other year I was thinking of.
That was in Charlotte.
15 was in Charlotte. Yeah, 13 was when we were down there in the armpit.
Right.
That is Columbia. John Bauman.
Guys, I'm shocked here. We have 4 losses on the board already. We have the greatest football coach of all time coaching the North Carolina Tar Heels. He has 8 months to game plan against TCU. He's probably watched every throw Josh Hoover has made in his entire life, going back to 8U ball or whatever. And still, you guys are picking TCU. That's a little surprising to me. Before I make my pick, the Inside Carolina community does not agree with you guys at all. They have this one as a win. It's a little tighter as the night has gone on. It's gotten a little tighter. Maybe people have been reacting to some of the message board news that's been dropped on the On3 premium football board. 54% believe it's a win. So I'll put that down as a win, 0.54. In terms of my pick, I'm kind of going to go ahead and agree with you guys, even though I'm a little surprised by it. Reason being, TCU is a better team than I think people realize. They are ranked 29th in F+. That would be 5th in the ACC. So you're putting them in that kind of Louisville type tier. I think if you kind of look at it that way, you'd put this down as a loss. So that's a loss for me. Should I swing down and do Charlotte, Tommy?
Yeah,
So
let's run through Charlotte and Richmond.
Briefly, one last thing on the TCU bit. One last thing is, if there is something to really add a little bit more optimism to this, take a look at TCU's head coach's record in openers over the years. Take a look at what he's managed to do they've underperformed in openers. I mean, I'm thinking especially you go back to the Colorado. That was not a great Colorado team. You go back to the Colorado opener that kind of paralleled this one in a lot of the hype ways. So that's one of the things that kind of gave me pause. So that's something to think about in this. It's still not enough to get me to pick Carolina, but it is something that gave me a lot of pause.
Yeah, I don't disagree. And look, I had Carolina winning this game, and I want badly to run it all the way out to get some more hype on the predictions. But I just got it as a loss. John, you can go ahead and let's knock out Charlotte and Richmond together. I think Charlotte's a better team than people think, but let's run Charlotte and Richmond together so we're not here till midnight.
So first, let's take care of the IC community. Not a single IC board member selected either Charlotte or Richmond. So a lot of faith from the message board community there. When I look at this Charlotte team, they are not a very good football team. Their options at quarterback, Grayson Loftus or Connor Harrell. The thing about Loftus is he did go for 3 touchdowns, 16 of 28 passing against the Tar Heels when he was playing for Duke a few years ago. But still, this is not a team with a ton of talent. That roster's not in a really great shape after they've made that coaching change there. Same with Richmond. I think that's a win as well. So I'm going 2-0 in this stretch of games. How about you, Tommy?
Yep, I'll keep it simple. Win-win for Carolina. That game in Charlotte's going to be fun. They brought in a ton of new seats. They're expanding that stadium, but they've put in temporary bleachers there, scored some 50-yard line seats for that. But it's going to be a fun atmosphere, I think, in Charlotte. But, yeah, win-win. Richmond game should be a walkover. Greg, you're up.
Charlotte's been playing this level of football for 10 years. You know how many times they've finished inside the top 100 of the metrics?
0.
That would be 0. That's hard to do. It's hard to be that bad consistently. But credit to the 49ers. That's what they're good at. So, no, Carolina will win these 2 games pretty easy.
Jason Staples, Charlotte and Richmond. Keep it short.
Put me down for a win and a 1.0 and a 1.0. I don't see either of these games as really a viable, even a trap game for Carolina.
Ditto.
All right, let's roll it back around. So that's win-win. Carolina's currently 2-1 on our predictions. 3-0 with the IC community. Shout out to Johnny T-shirt as well. Buck, Jason, Greg, John B. On to UCF down in Orlando at the Bounce House. Pretty good environment there. Hope it is. Going to make that trip as well. But Buck, you're up. UCF on the road.
I feel like I'm going out on a limb here when I say I think North Carolina wins this game. I just think from a overall talent perspective, and what we know about North Carolina's talent really is not great. That's not a tremendous peg to hang your hat on this year, because what we know about the North Carolina talent is not great, except everybody in this room except for Jason maybe. But I think that North Carolina has a more talented team, and I just think they'll pick up that win in Orlando. Coming off a couple of wins over lesser teams where they've had an opportunity to learn a little bit and had a chance to tweak some things. I think they'll be prepared to go down to Orlando and win.
Jason. Jason's going to get the first muted of the bunch.
No, I'm not. I just had to collect my thoughts for a second, because this is one that's close. I think this one's closer than the experts think, because I think UCF's quarterback, they added Tavian Jackson, Taven Jackson, that is, from Indiana, who I really like at quarterback. By the way, they have 17 transfers on offense and 1 returning starter. Along with a new coach in Scott Frost, this is Scott Frost 2.0. with him. And they've got a few other pretty good transfers. I mean, Najalek Kelly and Malachi Lawrence, pretty good on the ends. There's some talent on this roster, and I think they'll have some explosiveness and be pretty dangerous. But this is a spot where I think a Belichick Carolina team starts to find its feet. And coming off of the two games where they're getting an opportunity to really play preseason football and find out who they are, I think this is where Carolina really starts to see the benefit there. I think this is a win. I'm going to go with 0.76 on this. But it is a bit of a dangerous game. Actually, make that 0.66.
Greg, you're up. I love the point Jason made. I'll expound when it's my turn, but Greg, you're on the clock.
I think this is the toughest stretch of the schedule for North Carolina. I mean, they've got 2 of the last 8 national champions back to back. UCF, of course, won 2017 national championship.
I was going to make that joke too, and I can't believe you did it.
And Scott Frost at UCF, and then Dabo Sweeney at Clemson. So this is going to be a tough test. No, it's fascinating to watch a guy like Frost who went from winless at UCF in 2015, or the program was winless in 2015, to he turns around to undefeated in 2017, and then he leaves to the cornfields and it's just a disaster. And now he's kind of being resurrected back in Orlando. So I think it's a situation where, as Jason said, they've got some interesting pieces that have transferred in. They don't have a lot that has come back that's going to be beneficial. And so they're really kind of trying to learn about themselves as well. And I think the advantage that TCU has is that it's year 4 under Dykes. He kind of knows what he's got. And that's a big advantage when you have a new coaching staff coming in. Frost doesn't have that advantage. And so I agree with the idea that, a month in, after 2 pretty easy wins, Belichick's probably going to have this team rolling a little bit. And even though it will be one of the tougher games because it's a road game, one of the few times that Carolina leaves the state, I do think North Carolina is able to win this one.
Greg's got him with a win. I'm going to win here to Jason's point. Having this Charlotte and Richmond, Belichick made that comment, was it yesterday? Whenever we had availability in the short practice time. Yeah, yesterday. He made the point of not having preseason games like you do in the pros to be able to see what your team's like. Well, they get that opportunity, and I think they have it figured out by the time they go to UCF. And so I think these first 4 games here are sort of working the kinks out and figuring out what they actually have against other people. But I'm going with a win at UCF down in Orlando against the proclaimed national champions from 17, as Greg pointed out. John?
I'll start with the IC community. Some interesting responses here. 68% picked UNC to win against UCF. Pretty similar to Jason's prediction there. I maybe a little bit higher than I thought there in terms of IC picking a loss. This is a really interesting game for me. I circled on my sheet as well, like Jason called out, very few returning starters for them. They did have the 40th best portal class, according to the On3 rankings. To me, this is where I really circle the offensive line injuries and who's going to be available for this game, who's healthy at this point in the season. I think that could make an impact in a game like this. Maybe if some guys heal up, that changes over the course of the season. But for me, I'm going out on a limb here. I'm putting this down as a loss. Should I flip down to Clemson?
Absolutely. But I want to make the point, and Greg and Buck and Jason, you've been watching this a long time. We've, of course, seen 2 byes during the season, and that's the setup, especially when you have a week 0 game. But have we ever seen a situation where a team has a bye, plays a tremendous game, and then has another bye? It's just a weird setup here for me going into that. But, yeah, that when it comes around to you guys, I'd like to hear your thoughts on that. But, John, go ahead and knock out Clemson.
The IC community was not as optimistic about this Clemson game. Only 2 brave souls picked UNC to beat Clemson. The rest, 99%, had it down as a loss. So I'll go ahead and put that down there as a loss, 0.02. To me, this one is pretty simple as well. Clemson just overwhelms with the talent that they have. Their defensive line, I think, is going to really eat against UNC's offensive line. I'm picking a loss here. Tommy?
Yeah, I mean, at least Carolina will be prepared for Cade Klubnik in this one. Whether or not they can stop him, but to your point, it's the defensive line for Clemson. Those guys are monsters. Carolina needs to be healthy. I think at that point, they should have some health on the offensive line. But Clemson's just too good, and Carolina aspires to get to that level. That's what Belichick has really talked about Dabo Swinney a lot over these last months. But I just think Clemson. I don't think it's a similar game than it was in 19. I think Clemson comes in and handles business. It would not surprise me if Carolina made a game out of it, but I'm going with Clemson for sure. Greg?
Yeah, Clemson's kind of been down by Clemson standards last couple of years, and a lot of that is not having that stud quarterback. And we're about to see, does experience outweigh some talent? Klubnik's okay. He's solid. He had a good end of the year last year. Can he be good enough to really help this team contend for a national championship? I don't think so, but I do think he's going to be pretty solid for them. I think they're the class of the ACC. Hopefully this is a game like Mac's first year against Clemson, where it's very competitive and it's fun, and Carolina's got a chance at the end. I don't think it'll be quite that way, so I've got Clemson winning this one by double digits.
Jason, you're up.
Yeah, I'm with everybody here. Again, I think college football at all levels tends to be won on the line of scrimmage and at the quarterback position. And Clemson has, I think, the edge at both spots. The other thing is that not only is Clemson better on the defensive line than they've been really since they were title contenders, but also for the first time in a while, they've got a true, I think, number 1 and really number 2 wide receiver on their roster as well. I mean, I think both TJ Moore and Bryant Wesco this year are going to be really good, and they've got some depth behind those guys. They're going to be really, really good, and I think this is a team. I've got Clemson in my national championship game in the preseason. I've got them picked to be in the national title game. I think this is a game where they come in and they handle business. They're just going to be a better team, I think. But again, I wouldn't be surprised to see Carolina find a way to scheme up and do some things to keep it close. But I don't see Clemson losing this. I'll say Clemson 0.08 for likelihood of a win for Carolina.
Buck.
Yeah, I agree with what everybody else said. I'm going to call this a loss as well. And if you're a sensible person, you're going to call this a loss in general. I mean, the SP Plus and the FPI are favoring Clemson in like the 75%, 80% range. So those teams tend to win every time. So I'm going to go with a loss as well.
Coming out of the bye, Carolina goes to Cal. Well, I'll reserve. I will yield to Buck for your pick here, and then I will take the floor when it's my turn. This is an interesting trip. I've talked to some people in some of the other sports that have gone to Cal to play, and they say it's an interesting trip for these schools to go out to Cal to play the different sports. Carolina gets them. I believe that game's Friday night, right? It's a Friday night game at 10:30 Eastern time, so after bedtime for a lot of folks. But Buck, you're up on at Cal in Carolina.
Yeah, I went out to Berkeley in 2018, and as you say, Tommy, it's an interesting trip. I'm not sure I'm going to go this year. I got a little conflict, but this is a game that for North Carolina to have a a good season, and we know that's 8-4 around here, then this is a game they have to win. They've got to win this game, and there are several of these games that are going to make or break this season, and I don't really have a tremendous amount of confidence that they're going to win, but I'm going to pick them to win regardless because they need to win this game. More so because they need to win it than I actually expect. I think it's a 50-50 game pretty much at this point. But since it's 50-50, I'm going to favor the Tar Heels in this one.
Jason and then Greg.
So I'm a little bit more optimistic about this than Buck is. I do agree with the comment that Slagle had that if this was not after a bye, I would have more concern about this game as a real trap game because of the time of night. And if you go back historically and look at teams from the East Coast going back and playing those super late Pac-12 after dark type games, it normally does not go well for the team from the East. In the same way that if you're playing one of those teams from the West, you want to play them at a noon start. Get them at 9 o'clock in the morning, their time, and those don't go very well. This is one of those late games, but I think they're going to be better prepared for that off of the opportunity to take some time with that bye and get a little bit. I would venture to guess that Belichick is going to move the practice times later in the day, in the lead up to this, and get guys shifting their biological clock a little bit there, their circadian rhythms. But I think that bye will give them a chance to get over the loss to Clemson, and then I think they'll go out there, and I think they will beat this Cal team. I'm going to go with 0.75 in this with a win against Cal.
Knock it out, Greg.
All right, I'm going to try to pronounce his name, and I'm going to butcher it like I butcher all these names. But Cal named a true freshman quarterback, John Keave Sagapolutili. I think that's actually pretty good.
That was pretty good.
True freshman. I know they play Minnesota early. Minnesota's always got good defense, but I just have a hard time, and I hope to be able to laugh at what Belichick can do with a 18-year-old kid who's never started a season in football at the college or pro level. Maybe I'm wrong, but I just see that as something he's frothing at the mouth to have that opportunity to confound and befuddle a kid like that. The Pac-12 after dark thing is real, and that's somewhat of a problem. But I really think this is our first excellent opportunity, given that Wilcox has always had pretty good defenses, but his offenses have not been any good, to see like a 6-3 game. And I'm super excited about that on Halloween night. I think that'll be a lot of fun. I do think it's funny, and we talked a lot about, we're dating ourselves here, but in some of John Bunning's teams 20 years ago, the whole joke was, the good news is he's returning a lot of starters. The bad news is he's returning a lot of starters. And I thought it was funny this offseason that Wilcox, when people have asked him that, hey, you lost your starting quarterback, you lost all your running backs, you lost all these tight ends and wide receivers, and Wilcox is like, yeah, but we weren't any good on offense anyway. So I think there's something to that. I think that's fun, but I don't think North Carolina is going to lose this game, even though it is going to be a little bit of a tough one given the logistics. But I got Carolina winning this one.
Yeah, you're 2 weeks earlier because Halloween's at Syracuse, but I agree with you.
Yeah,
and
close
I
enough.
remember, yeah, October. I remember when Carolina went out to Arizona State and played late, and I believe Darian Durant went nuts, and that was a high-scoring game. I don't see that happening here, but I do see Carolina beating Cal out there. I may try to make that trip. I've been in that stadium, run around on that field, probably unlawfully, but yeah, this is a game that after a bye and getting that extra week to prepare to go that far out is a big deal for Carolina, and so I got to win. John, what you got?
I'm going to start with the IC community pick here. 82% picked a UNC win here, so pretty confident in the Tar Heels from the IC community. Appreciate all of you who participated in the poll there, and also shout out to all 435 of you who are watching us live here now on YouTube. Thanks for supporting the show. For me, this is a tough one. This is when you start. We haven't talked about this a ton tonight, but I think it's important to reiterate here for this audience. This is where you start to make some tough decisions. You say, do you start to weigh the lack of strength of schedule versus the lack of talent on UNC's roster, and how do you weigh those two things? Because this Cal team is going to be one of the bottom, kind of at the bottom tier of Power 4 teams, regardless of conference. You've got a couple of those types of teams on the schedule here. And then you got the UNC team that lost a lot of good players off of last year's team, brought in some guys from the portal, but is that enough to get over the edge? In this case, I'm going to pick a win here, but this was really close for me. I think another thing that puts this over the edge for me is Belichick and the professionalism, preparation, taking his team on a road trip like this. He's done this before in the National Football League. He'll have the team prepared.
Indeed. We are 6 games into North Carolina's 2025 schedule, predicting it here on the annual Inside Carolina Prediction Show. Shout out to, like John said, now the 444 folks that are in here. I wonder what the over-under is on how many people that'll be watching the day after on Tuesday after the TCU game. Might need to put some lines out for that, but one person or one group that'll be there for sure is Johnny T-Shirt. They're sponsors of the show. They're sponsors of Inside Carolina. One thing you need to do, they've been a sponsor for Inside Carolina forever. They've given you 10% off for being an Inside Carolina premium subscriber forever. But there's a new Johnny T-Shirt code that you can only get at the On3 message boards. And so you need to sign up for your premium subscription at On3 and get the new Johnny T-Shirt code there on the On3 or on the Inside Carolina On3 premium message boards. So Johnny T-Shirt, JohnnyT-shirt.com. The code works both places. The 10% off works online or in person. And they're always doing their best to help the Carolina fan. And that's you guys. If you're on Inside Carolina, you're a diehard Carolina fan. You need to be a diehard Johnny T-Shirt supporter. So check them out. National guys will pay the bills. We're 37, 38, 39 minutes in. We got 6 more games to go with the Inside Carolina crew. We'll be right back on the audio version. Stay right here on the YouTube version. John B., since we're going snake. No. Yeah, since we're going snake, I'm going to let you start because I want to set up the last game of the season to come down to Buck Sanders. But let's go. You and UVA in Carolina. This is a game here that 1,000,000% for me changes based on the coaching staff. But what you got on Virginia and Carolina, John?
Inside Carolina community is very confident on this one, 98% win percentage. Virginia's had a very interesting fall camp. If you've been super clued in on them, they've had a lot of injury concerns. You kind of wonder who will be healthy at that point in the season. This is a Virginia team as well that lost one of their biggest playmakers, Malachi Fields, to Notre Dame in the offseason in the transfer portal. To me, this is another one where I think UNC has the coaching acumen and maybe a little bit more depth than a Virginia program. So I have this as a win.
Yeah, I'll keep it short. I've never been adverse to Virginia, as a lot of people are, but Carolina's going to win this game. If this was last year, I would have trepidation saying an easy win, but I got Carolina winning over Virginia. Greg?
Yeah, Jason's big on talking about this, so if I steal his bullet point, I apologize. But if you have a really good quarterback, you typically have a puncher's chance. And Chandler Morris was fantastic in North Texas last year. I thought it was interesting that Virginia, I think, paid $1.2 million for him, which says a lot about Virginia kind of coming around to the times. So if there's any hesitancy in this game, it would be, is that a kid that can light it up? But I just don't think there's enough around him. I'm not convinced that Tony Elliott's a good coach. They've played well in spots, but just not consistently. I think he's running out of time. And because of that, I think with this being a home game, I think Carolina handles this one quite easily.
Jason and then Buck.
I'm with everything Greg just said, and so I don't need to re-say it. It was very well put. I think actually Tony Elliott probably gets fired after this season, and yeah, I'm going to go with Carolina .8.
Buck Sanders.
Yeah, I think this is one of several games against opponents on this schedule that the team we're discussing is not a great rushing team. They do not run the ball particularly well at Virginia. And thinking off the top of my head, I think if North Carolina has a weakness, it will be against a team that can run the ball really, really well. And I don't think Virginia is that team. And they have them at home. And I'm going to call it a win.
Sticking with you, Buck, you got at Syracuse. This is the Halloween game on a Friday night up in what I'm going to call, they named it the Carrier Dome. I'm going to call it the Carrier Dome. Buck, you're up.
Yeah, this one gives me a little bit of a headache. And I'm going to call this a loss, even though Cuse doesn't run the ball very well either. But I just think that based on what we saw last year, Fran Brown is a very solid coach. He's going to know his team pretty well. This is one of the games that, North Carolina needs to win, but picking up another road win here, I don't think is maybe a completely reasonable expectation.
Jason and then Greg.
So ditto everything Buck just said. I actually this is one of those where you're kind of searching for losses on the season based on probabilities and injuries and things like that. And this being a road game after what I think is going to be a nice win at home against UVA, this is a loss I think, but I think close. And this is one I'm not comfortable picking this as a loss, but I think they probably needs to be an extra loss on the schedule here as this team kind of rounds into shape. So I'm going to go with a loss, but I don't feel real good about it. We'll say 0.54 or 0.46. That is.
Gregory.
Here's my Halloween game. The Friday night games is what got me. I mean, when's the last time Carolina played 2 Friday night games in a year? Have they ever done that? I don't know.
I don't remember Friday night games, period.
Well, I think the Carolina Duke game where Carolina coughed up that big lead last year was a Friday night game, if I remember correctly. But there hasn't been many of them. But anyway, yeah, this is a really tough one. I really think this is a toss-up for the reasons that Buck and Jason laid out. I saw where Angeli got named starting quarterback. He competed with C.J. Carr at Notre Dame back in the spring. Of course, Carr's been named starting quarterback for the Irish. So I think Fran Brown has been impressive. I thought he did a really good job last year. Of course, when you have a guy like McCord playing as well as he did, that simplifies things. I don't think they're going to be quite as good this year. But with that being a night game, with it being a little bit of a short week, that factors into it as well, even though Carolina's had bye weeks within the past month, which helps with fatigue. So I really can go either way here. I think I'm going to go with Carolina getting a win. But this is probably the most of the toss-up games for me is this one in Syracuse.
Yeah, I agree with everything. I'm going to go loss here. I want to go win, but I'm going to go loss. Just, I think Syracuse is better. And like I said, I like their coach. And playing up there on a Friday night, that place will have a little hype to it. This might be a game where some Belichick magic can pull out a win, but I will wager a loss there. John, you're up in the community.
So this Syracuse team is really interesting to me. On the one hand, they had a real exodus from the transfer portal this fall. On3 has their transfer portal rankings. I really like their rankings because they include both inflows and outflows as they're doing it. And Syracuse ranked 68th in that metric. And you say, 68th, that's not that bad. they only ranked 70 teams. So that's third worst of the Power 5 teams that were rated. They lost a lot of really good players. At quarterback, though, I am intrigued by Steve Angeli. He played really well in the college football playoff when he came in for that one drive against Penn State. If you probably gave some truth serum to the Notre Dame coaching staff, they would be like, man, we shouldn't have let Angeli get away, because they had an interesting quarterback battle in their fall camp. This is another one for me. I could go either way, but I'm going to have this as a loss. And for the Inside Carolina community, this was a really interesting one to me, a little bit of a surprise here. The majority responses were loss. So we have a loss and 0.38%, actually 37 predicted a win there. So this is one of the, I'll do a little spoiler here, one of only 2 games on the schedule where a majority of Inside Carolina viewers picked a loss. So that shows how Inside Carolina thinks about this game being on the road at kind of a weird point in the season. Should I roll into Stanford?
Yeah, we can run through Stanford fairly quickly. This would be a monumental hiccup. But I think if we all agree, we can run it through once you show the community. And so 100% of the Inside Carolina community picked Carolina to win this game. I'm going to say win. John, what you got? And then Buck, Greg, and Jason can just shout it out.
This is a win, even if Andrew Luck's playing at quarterback.
I'm going win. What you got, Greg?
Dearest Josie and that Andrew Luck's thing. Hat tip to ESPN stats and info for this little nugget, and I'll just add this, and then you can go ahead and write down win, John. The last time that Stanford increased this win total from the previous year was 2015. Isn't that crazy?
That is nuts.
That is wild. So that's all I got.
Carolina beat them. Yeah, go ahead.
Yep, that's a win. 0.97. It's going to be a bad Stanford team.
Remember last time Stanford came to Kenan Stadium was 98? Was it 97? It was 97. Chad Hutchinson's quarterback.
Brown last year.
Yeah, Carolina won 28-17. That's pretty epic.
Carolina lost to Stanford in El Paso.
In 16.
When Gio was running back.
Well, Trubisky on the 2-point conversion made Solomon Thomas a lot of money, if I remember correctly. Yep. Carolina's had has had the privilege of making guys a lot of money on the football field. Both.
I'm going to go
Carolina
win. I'm going to go win. Here's this is interesting to me. Stanford is the lowest ranked power forward team in the FPI. Dead last among all the Power 4 conferences. And while I'm here for a minute, let me remind everybody that this is very unusual. Greg Barnes has picked the fewest losses through this game as anybody on this panel, which that is unheard of. Worth commenting on at this point. We'll see how it plays out the rest of the way, but he's got the fewest, UNC with the fewest losses so far among your celebrity pickers.
Well, I can hear Greg saying, not so fast, my friend. But we will get to that. Buck, you're up at Wake Forest. I will say this. Wake Forest fans do not like Carolina. It is an interesting place to go watch a game on the road. Everybody talks about Carter Finley. At Wake Forest, you can get into some interesting situations. But Buck, at Wake, Carolina, we're getting late in the season. Mac lamented having to play the rivals back-to-back. Well, Carolina's got the in-state rivals, the trifecta here to end the season. You're up.
You know, I think this game will probably be a little closer than I'd like for it to be, but I'm going to predict a win here. New head coach. They've lost a lot. They do have a great running back, though. So that's puts a little fear into me. But I just think overall North Carolina's going to be a little bit too much for them. Tommy's exactly right, though. For a Baptist school, they know words that I only learned in the confines of their stadium in Winston-Salem. Did not know that such words existed before visiting there. So,
The stories we could tell. Jason, you're up on at Wake.
I taught at Wake Forest for a year, and boy, I could tell some stories about that too. But we're going to go ahead and just call this a win as well. I think this is going to be a bad Wake Forest team. They've got a couple players, but I just, at this stage of the season, I think Carolina is going to actually have figured out kind of who they are, and I think they're a good bit more talented than Wake. And we're at the point of the schedule where you're picking based on, to a large degree, you're picking based on the quality of the opponent much more than you are on the quality of the Carolina team. I still maintain that this may be a 6 or 7 win roster, but it might be a 10-win schedule. And so somewhere between there is probably where we're going to find the results. And this is one of those where I think this is one of those that a decent team beats this Wake team even on the road. And we're also now in the point of the season where Carolina doesn't leave the state of North Carolina again after that, from that Stanford game moving forward. So they'll be nice and rested. They'll take out Wake here. I'm going to go 0.95.
Here we go, Greg Barnes.
Yeah, I mean, I think Wake's about as bad as Stanford. So I don't think this is going to be much of a difficult game for North Carolina, even though it is in Winston-Salem.
Wait, so I just got to hold on this for a second. Greg, at this point in the season, UNC is, what's that, 8-2? So you'd have them 16th in the college football playoff rankings, and the hype train would be off the rails at this point. Is that kind of how you see the season going?
I do. And like I said, that Syracuse game's really hit or miss for me. But I think North Carolina, if Gio Lopez is kind of what we've heard, I think Carolina can enter this last couple weeks of the regular season as a legitimate CFP contender.
Wow.
You heard it here first. Greg Pessimist Barnes.
I didn't mean to put a target on your back there, Greg, when I pointed out your win totals there.
In the year 2030, people are going to be giving Greg hell about predictions in the 25 season. I'm going win at Wake Forest. The season does not end at Wake Forest as it did a couple years ago, seemingly for a North Carolina team that clinched their spot in the ACC championship, but win at Wake. What you got, John?
So I brought up the transfer portal rankings earlier when I was talking about Syracuse. Wake Forest is also down there at the bottom as well. They're 65th in On3's transfer portal rankings. That's 5th worst. This is another roster in the ACC that just does not have a lot of high-end talent. It's kind of year zero for that coaching staff. I'm picking this one as a win. Let's get to what the IC community thinks. The IC community is pretty confident in this one as well. 96% selected a win here. So the IC community is right there with Greg in terms of positive vibes heading into the season. IC has UNC at 8-2 as well heading into week 11. Can you imagine the hype for that Duke game, that final home game, what that might look like? Tommy, how do you want me to do this? Do you want me to, what do you think?
Let's go back to Buck.
Okay.
Let's go back to Buck for Duke, and then we'll snake it back to Buck for NC State. But Buck, you're up. Carolina and Duke, it could be a pretty impressive environment. Carolina and Duke have had some impressive environments the last several years. This one will be in Kenan. What you got, Buck?
Well, this is another game that I'm torn about, and if you actually look at the FPI and do the math on it, North Carolina plays a lot of games that are predicted to be one-score games. So we're talking about coin flips in a lot of different games. And so as much as I dislike doing it, I'm going to pick a loss here as well to Duke. I just don't know. I think Duke has a very solid team defensively. They went out and got a good quarterback. They got a good running game. I think as far as holes or question marks, North Carolina has dozens of question marks about his team compared to very few on Duke. From looking at it from this point forward, Duke has a lot fewer question marks than North Carolina does. So I'm going to pick them to lose.
Jason, you're up to pick it. I would, at some point, we need to talk about the Mensa-Lopez dynamic and maybe a comparison. But you're up. Duke, Carolina at Kenan.
I think Duke is the third best team on Carolina's schedule. So, sort of gone back and forth of whether this should be the loss or Syracuse should be the loss. I picked them to lose against Syracuse, so I'm going to split the difference with two 50-50 games basically here. I think Carolina beats Duke, gets the victory bell back. Home field ends up kind of winning out here, but I think this is a very close game. I think you're going to see this be one where you see the difference with a Belichick coach team starting to hit its stride late in the year, and that's where I'm gonna take Carolina to win this game. But like I said, this is one I don't feel real good about because I think this is the third best team on the schedule, maybe the second best team. I think Clemson is clearly the best team, and then I think it's either Duke or TCU for the next best team on the schedule. And so this one's they're gonna have their hands full, but I'm gonna go with Carolina to win this 0.52.
Very close. Greg?
Not necessarily sold on Manny Diaz for obvious reasons. And I know a lot of Duke's success last year was this kind of remnants of Mike Elko. But I really thought Manny did a good job last year. And I know they brought in Malik Murphy. He had a big arm. I just didn't think he was really that good of a quarterback. And for them to be able to win 9 games the way that they did was really impressive to me. I think they're going to be a better team on both sides of the ball this year, especially offensively. And then when you talk about a guy like Mensa coming in, while Malik had a big arm, Mensa does not, but he's really accurate. He's a good dual threat. Murphy was not. I think Duke's probably going to be 7-3 coming into this game. They have a little bit tougher schedule than North Carolina, so there's going to be a lot of hype. But I've got Duke winning this one. I think it's going to be a competitive game. But I think having Mensa and just having a better cast of characters, especially on the lines, is going to give Duke another victory over North Carolina.
Oh boy, this is the stretch here where, to me, it's you split them, and the question is, do you split them and go 0-5 to NC State, or do you give Duke their flowers? I just don't see Duke winning in Kenan Stadium, given what environment that could be. I'm gonna go Carolina. I'm gonna go Carolina. John,
That was not a very confident pick, Tommy. It seems like you're
because
thinking it over.
Yeah, I mean, this is one of those things like we talked about. It's going to depend on the health, and specifically the health of Carolina's offensive line against a team like Duke, because those dudes can play. And but I'm gonna go win. I'm not doing the percentages like Jason does, because it doesn't matter whether it's 1 or 100 as long as you got more points. So I'm going Carolina will have at least 1 more point than Duke. And
by the way, the health of the defensive line at this point in the season is going to be absolutely pivotal, because they're coming in with some. I'm not sure that they're not real thin on the interior, and so a couple injuries there could really derail things down the stretch.
Valid point, John. What do you say? What does the community say?
I'll start with the community here. 70% predict UNC beats Duke at home, and then perhaps shockingly, perhaps not shockingly, I don't know, 76% think UNC is going to beat NC State. I'm going to throw this question to Greg real quick, just as a hypothetical for fun. Does 10-2 UNC, no ACC championship game because the 2 conference losses, let's say hypothetically they get out, does 10-2 UNC make the college football playoff? I say no.
I think there's a good chance that 2 ACC teams make the playoff. And if Carolina's 10-2 and they don't make the ACC championship game, that means there's Clemson and somebody else is really good. I think there's an outside chance that Carolina could get in. I think it's going to be totally dependent upon what some of those SEC teams do. But clearly Carolina's schedule is very favorable. And so if they don't get in, it will be because of a weak schedule.
It's an interesting thought exercise. The community is very optimistic for the season. For me, unfortunately, for the Tar Heels, not the same story here. I have this game here against Duke as a loss. I have NC State as a loss as well. To me, what this is about is this is kind of an inverse of the last few seasons for North Carolina. Previous seasons, it was, can UNC's NFL talent overcome the coaching mishaps, the coaching mistakes? This year, it's, can the coaching overcome some of the talent deficiencies on the roster? I think even with the light schedule, I end up at 6-6. I just don't see it with a lot of position groups. I have questions about the depth. That's a good call out there, Jason, about the defensive line depth late in the season. Think about this from my point of view. This is a year zero for Bill Belichick. This is a tryout year. I expect him to solidify who he likes on this roster heading into year two. Major changes into year two for this roster as he kind of mixes and matches throughout the year. So I have them at 6-6, perhaps a little under what people are expecting, under the over-under win total by the sports books. Tommy, what do you think?
I had them splitting Duke and NC State, but they ain't losing to NC State again. This fan base, this school cannot suffer a loss to NC
Couldn't
State.
pull a
again.
trigger because you're Tommy.
I
Couldn't
couldn't
pull the trigger.
There's some things that just aren't allowed in predicting that. And we'll talk when everybody picks. We'll talk about the predictions here. But John, you're going for the biggest negative output ever if this season goes as planned. But anyway, Greg, you're up.
Tommy, North Carolina's last NFL head coach, what was his name?
Butch Davis.
Butch Davis. What was Butch Davis's record against NC State?
Ofer, wasn't it?
Ofer. So here's the deal. The NFL mentality, and this is pretty much how a lot of high-end coaches approach things. But if you look at Kirby Smart and you look at Lane Kiffin and you look at Dabo, emotion matters. Rivalries matter at the college level. Butch Davis was very much of the mindset that it's on to the next opponent. You know, we're only worried about the next opponent. We're not elevating one in our players' minds. It's just the next team. If you're really good, you can take that approach. If you're in a 50-50 game, I'm always going to go with the team where the coach rallies the players around the emotions and says negative things about the opponent and calls them names, even on TV. That matters at the college level. I don't think State's going to be great this year, but I do think this is a team that's going to go what they normally do, 7-5, maybe 8-4. I think Bailey's a good quarterback, and they have a better offense than they've probably had in a few years now. Questions on defense, of course. But with this game being in Raleigh, with that fan base rabid over the opportunity to send Bill Belichick into the postseason with a loss, there's going to be a lot of emotion on NC State's sideline. Can Belichick figure out how to make that work? He's never had to before. And so because of that, I've got NC State winning this game.
We knew Greg would come around. Jason
Boy.
Staples. And shout out to 519 folks in here.
This one, this is really, really interesting because you made some great points there, Greg. But if there was a coach of this era in the NFL who I would identify as the most rivalry-oriented head coach in the NFL through the era that he coached, it's Belichick. Look at what they did when they played the Peyton Manning Colts, when they played up against the Bills.
Buffalo.
Buffalo was, and the Jets with the whole bad blood there. Belichick had a habit of saving just a little something extra for each time that he would play one of those teams. And the other thing that he did such a great job of, and this is one of the reasons why they won so many Super Bowls, why they made it through the playoffs so many times the way that they did, is he did such a great job of just holding back the right wrinkle for the right time come playoff time. Where, I mean, you can go back to, I want to say it was probably 2000, maybe 2009. I can't remember the year, but it was late 2000s, where Manning was still in Indianapolis, and there was a game that they played in the regular season, and basically Belichick kind of took that one and played pretty vanilla and showed a bunch of different stuff, and then when they played him in the playoff, everything was different. And they gamed Manning, and they got the upper hand one more time with just a few more wrinkles, because he knew Manning was ready for everything that they do, and he zigged when they zagged, and they won that yet again, and they went on and they won a Super Bowl. So if there is a coach from the NFL who I do believe is gonna take that rivalry games matter just that little bit more and save just a little bit for that kitchen sink game, I think that's going to be Bill Belichick. That's the reason that I'm ultimately going to pick for them to get over the hump at NC State in this game. So it's really interesting for me to hear you say the opposite in terms of your rationale. But I think they get over the hump. I think this is close to a coin flip. This is very much a game I would not be surprised either way. And that's also a good point. Hunter Pierce points out there's no Tony Gibson there on defense, and I think he's been really good as a defensive coordinator down there. Now, DJ Elliott is a really good defensive mind and defensive coach there as well, and so they'll be good. But I just ultimately, I think this is where you see some of the benefits of late season Bill Belichick with the team that he's figured out, and with, I think, a quarterback that he's going to like, and an offense that's going to be able to score points late in the year. I think they're actually going to win with offense late in the year more than they're going to win with defense. And I think they find a way in this game at NC State. I'm going to say win, and I'm going to go 0.55.
Buck, I set it up to come back to you to close the prediction portion of the show at NC State. I think it's a gigantic game. Must wins. Everybody wants to say all that. I say it a lot. But this is a huge game for North Carolina, for the North Carolina program, period. What saith you, Carolina at NC State on Thanksgiving weekend?
Well, first of all, I agree with what Jason had to say. I like the way he thinks. I had not thought of that until he brought up that subject, but he's exactly on point. As far as playing in rivalry games, Belichick always had a rabbit or two to pull out of the hat that he had not previously disclosed. On the downside, what people have talked about in terms of the thinness of the defensive tackle interior spots on defense, that's a caveat you have to keep in mind, whether or not North Carolina has the talent on the interior at that point of the season. And the final point would be one that has been brought out on this panel already also, which is that Belichick's teams tend to get better towards the end of the year. They tend to show steady improvement throughout the year. They're not a Dow Jones kind of team, up one week, down the other. That's not Belichick's MO. If he continues that in his first year in the college ranks, then this is going to be a win. I'm going to call it a win. Defensively, NC State wasn't very good last year. I mean, they were near the bottom of the conference, I think maybe 14th or so. And I think that had little to do with Tony Gibson. It had a lot to do. They just didn't have the normal hitters and just intensity on defense that you normally see from them. So we'll see how that goes next year. If the defense does not rebound in a big way from the way they played last year, given everything else we've talked about, I see North Carolina winning this game. And a big surprise here, Jason Staples edges Greg Barnes down the stretch on the win-loss picks. He and Tommy Ashley are both 9-3. So the 9-3 is the new 12-0 for purposes of this podcast.
In fairness, that's a very unconfident 9-3 because my percentages put me at 8. So somewhere in there's a loss that I didn't account for, but it is what it is.
Just don't go back and change your picks like you normally do.
I resolved not to do that this season. I
good.
reserve the right to change my pick when we get to the actual game plan
I hear
podcast.
You.
And
We all do that.
We're leaving it.
We all do
We're
that.
leaving it.
In fairness, I think it's 8-4, but I just can't. I can't make it 8-4 in the last 2 weeks of the season.
You tried. You thought about it. You were going to.
That was exactly
just
where I wound up as
something
well.
in the DNA just would not allow it.
It was just like there's a block in there somewhere. So John has them 6-6. To credit John Siegley last year, he had Carolina 6-6, which was the only IC staffer had them 6-6. It looks like the IC community has Carolina 10-2.
That's right.
Buck 8-4, Jason 9-3, Greg 8-4, me 9-3. IC community 10-2. We're going to throw John. Do you have the other IC staffers just to get it up there while we're talking to show that?
Read through these real quick. Cade, our awesome new intern. Shout out to Cade. Had him at 8-4. Rel had him at 8-4. Matthew Clement 7-5. Michelle 9-3, very confident. Spencer, very confident. Taylor and Grace both had him at 8-4. So you can see some of the results there. Taylor with losses to UCF, Clemson, Syracuse, and Duke.
Yep. So pretty uniform here, and get ours back up there just so we can look at them. But let's close this show and shout out to the 500 folks that have been in here. We're a little over an hour. Try to keep these to an hour, but we're a little over that. I want to ask everybody individually, and I'll start with you, Jason. What is a success for North Carolina win-loss wise? Now, it's what those wins and losses look like, I'm aware. But wins, losses, when we're talking on Thanksgiving Sunday on the day after, and Carolina's had a successful season, what does that look like to you, Jason?
So, against this schedule, success, I think 8 wins is pretty good around here.
Is that your floor? I think it's the floor with this schedule, to be honest.
I do not think it's the floor. I want to be very clear about that. And really, if you're asking me what is my expectation for this team, I would say 8-4. I know I've got 9-3 up there when I'm picking through the games. It's just hard for me to find the one that I really feel matchup-wise is they're gonna screw up. But I think this is an 8-4 team. I think the floor is somewhere around 6-6 or 5-7. Now against this schedule, I think the floor is probably should be 6-6. But I think a successful season, a season in terms of the win column that you feel good about, is 8-4. And I'll add one other thing, and that is 8-4 with at least one win over a key opponent, over a key rival. So if you go 8-4, but you lost to NC State, Duke, Clemson, and TCU, that closing the season with losses to Duke and NC State is not going to feel like a successful season at 8-4. So at that point, if you get to that point, if you get to the Duke game and you've already got 8 wins, it's going to need to be a 9-win season for that season to feel successful. But I would say 8-4 is kind of what the expectation for a good season should be for this team.
But what do you think?
Against this schedule, I want to clarify.
Yeah, 100%.
I think that Jason's on point there, but I'd also say that, one of the things that has plagued North Carolina football for many years, and this includes coaches like Butch Davis, Larry Fedora, everybody, they had a bad habit of losing to bad teams during the year. They will cough up a loss, and I know that probably happens to every team, at some point. But I think good teams beat who they are supposed to beat. And so if North Carolina's favored to win a game by 7 points and they lose, or they're favored by 14 and they lose, to me that's not a good sign for a season. Something went wrong terribly for a loss like that. So eliminating those kinds of losses, I think, are key. And then I think maybe if you really want to send Bill Belichick out on a good note in his inaugural season, he beat somebody that he wasn't expected to beat. So those two things would be my key. But how we're going to talk about this on the day after Thanksgiving is going to depend a lot on what happened throughout the year. Does Gio Lopez break his leg on the first game of the season? Things like that, are going to have a say in how we talk about this team at the end of the year. But those other two things, I think, are important to me, whether they're important to anybody else or not.
Don't disagree with there. I think it comes down, and Greg, I'm going to let you close it because you're the voice of reason. I think it comes down to TCU, Syracuse, Duke, and State. Those 4 games, because I think Clemson is just a different level. Carolina needs to go at least 2-2 against those 4 teams for it to be a successful season. I think if they do that, they're at least 8-4. I think 6-6, and there's a lot of people wondering, is it just Carolina football? They're going to say even Bill Belichick can't win in Chapel Hill if they go 6-6 against this schedule. But I think 8-4 is the sweet spot. I think anything better, to Buck's point, you beat a team you're not supposed to beat. I just don't see many teams on the schedule that you're not supposed to beat other than Clemson. And that's the problem with this schedule. But anyway, Greg, close us out.
I think it's unfair to place incredibly high expectations on this coaching staff in year one. And I understand it's Bill Belichick, and he's arguably the greatest football coach of all time. I get all that. This is his first year coaching at the college level. When he signed on at North Carolina, they started bringing in all these kids immediately from the transfer portal. And come to find out, Lombardi says, however many weeks ago, that, yeah, when we first got here, we were just signing guys to fill out the roster. It wasn't until after spring that they started saying, okay, well, now we need to find playmakers. This is brand new. And I think we will see signs of how good this staff can be. I go back to 2007 Bama. Nick Saban went 7-6. And so from the outside, people could say, Nick Saban went to Bama, and look at them. They're still bad. But if you look closely at what they did, all 6 of their losses were by a touchdown or less. They were competitive in every game. I think they ended up being like 30th in SP+. And so even though the record didn't show it, there was dramatic improvement in how that team performed. And we saw very quickly after that what that meant. I think there's a potential for that this year. It's just going to take some finding out what works and what doesn't. They're very small nuances, but that kind of thing matters. And because there are a lot of these games that are so 50-50, you can't expect to win all those. And we've talked about this before, but if a team is favored by 7 points in every single game, all 12 games, their projected record's 8-4. Because if you're favored by a touchdown, you're only going to win on average 70% of the time. That makes things difficult, and that speaks to the fact that we've talked about for so many years now, that if you have a ton of talent and you're really good, and you're favored to win by 14 or 20 points, that's when you start talking about 10-win seasons. That's what Clemson's talking about this year. I don't know that North Carolina has that type of talent on this roster right now, regardless of how good the coaching staff is. I think in the years to come, with the recruiting that we're seeing that's taking place right now for next year, I think that's around the corner. I think Belichick and his staff are going to have to coach their rear ends off to get to 10 wins this year. Can it happen? Yes. I just think it's asking a lot. So 6-6, I don't think anybody's going to think that's acceptable. But I think 8-4 would be a really good year for North Carolina this year.
I've said, you talk about no team's going to win all of those. I want to see Carolina not lose those games. And I'm not talking about the actual loss. I'm talking about giving away a game or anything like that. And I think that's where the difference is. I remember Butch Davis went 4-8 his first year. But they were competitive, they were close, and everybody was on it, on the train there. And I'm not a Butch disciple by any means, because 0-5 against NC State sucks. And you're not a good coach or great coach college-wise if you do that. But at any rate, I think it's 8-4. Anything less than 6-6 is no bueno. John, what did I see community say? And then let's get out of here.
One quick point for me. In some ways, for the athletic department, this has already been a success because they've sold out the ticket allotment. The excitement is off the charts. For year one for the Bill Belichick regime, that's a big piece of why they made this bet, as Greg has talked about, on the football program. Let's see what the Inside Carolina community said for this one. One thing that was really interesting to me, over 100 responses. Not a lot of people were talking about college football playoff. What came up over and over again: sound, well-coached football team, not beating yourself, no blowout losses and beat in-state opponents, noticeable improvement throughout the season, disciplined football regardless of opponent. So I think the fan base has reasonable expectations here. It's kind of exactly what we've been talking about. Want to see a better football product on the field, not sky-high expectations in terms of wins and losses. Appreciate all 454 people who are watching us live here. Make sure if you're watching us live, you're subscribed to our YouTube channel. We've seen a lot of new viewers come in over the last few weeks. Thanks so much for joining us. Tommy, take us out here.
Yeah, let's get out of here. Shout out to Buck Sanders, as always, Jason Staples, Greg Barnes, and John Bauman. It's been the Inside Carolina annual prediction show. It is always a fun one to do. Shout out to the 500 plus that were in here for most of the time. We're getting out of here in just under an hour and a half. If you're watching this later, like John said, make sure you subscribe to the YouTube channel so you get those alerts. If you're watching it or listen to it on the podcast feeds, make sure you rate, review, subscribe to that as well. And make sure you're with the On 3 Inside Carolina community on the new website. Same great site, same great staff. It's just on the On 3 network. So you need to subscribe and get your username and get in on the game for $1. I'll buy that for $1, where you can get Inside Carolina and everything that comes with it for $1. And you get Johnny T-shirt 10% off. Boys, I'm out of here. Appreciate everybody taking the time. Next time you'll hear from us, it'll be game week. We'll have a game plan podcast this time next week, talking about on to TCU. It shall be fun. Buck, take care. Jason, Greg, John, everybody watching in Inside Carolina community. Peace.